live, you are live.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the northeast corner of the most brilliant country in the world, that is sunny South Africa. And we sit here in the Kruger National Park, an iconic wilderness area of the world, proclaimed in 1926, just after the Union of South Africa. And since then, it has been welcoming tourists and forging ahead with African conservation forever. We're right, Brian?
No, you were just burning out.
I was burning out. I'm not burning out anymore. That is a camera term. Do not worry. I'm not, in fact, on fire. You are most welcome, especially Miss Mervine's class in Virginia Beach, Virginia. You are watching here from the Advanced Human Geography class. I don't know what that means, but I hope that you will ask me questions related to whatever Advanced Human Geography is, and I'll tell you as much as I can about Advanced Human Geography here in the wilderness of the Kruger National Park. My name is James Henry. On camera today is Brian. That's Brian's thumb, everyone. And on the other vehicle there is no one, because we are alone today. The other vehicle is down, broken, no longer. X not going to be functioning this afternoon. So you will be staring at my ugly mug, watching Brian's brilliant camera work, and hopefully finding some animals so that you don't have to stare at my ugly mug for the entire 3 hours that are about to pass. Louise is on the final control directing seat, and Kirsten is on the keys. That's called alliteration. I know that's for the English class that was yesterday. Advanced Human Geography doesn't worry about alliteration. Over there, Brian, we have some nyala. And the nyala are sexually dimorphic. So what that means is that the male is completely different. This is fascinating. I've never seen this before. Did you see that, Brian? We may have some mating here. That is unusual. Normally they're very private about it. So that is a male nyala, and that's a female nyala. Connor, I'm going to ask you a question again. You want to know the local areas. The settlements here are known as towns, villages, hamlets, clustered or dispersed. Connor, it's been a while since I did Advanced Human Geography, but out here we call them villages, and I suppose they would all be part of, you see, I mean, the terminology is slightly different out here, but they would be called villages, local villages, and they in turn would be part of a larger municipal area, which would in turn fall into a sort of region or province. And the largest town closest to us is Hoedspruit. Now, Hoedspruit would be considered a town. It's probably got a population of in excess of, well, all in about 20,000 people. And each of the little villages out here probably has a population of about 3,000 or 4,000 and comprised of various households with between 4 and 8 people in each. And as I said yesterday, they are largely from the Shangaan or Xitsonga group, and they're very poor rural villages, no municipal services in any of the villages, no running water, so everybody goes to fetch water from a communal village tap. There is some electricity, but it's very expensive, and a lot of people can't afford to pay for it. Nothing in the way of tarred roads or asphalt roads, paved roads. They're all dirt roads, rutted, fairly nastily sort of rutted roads. And what else do we have? There's no reticulated sewage, so all sort of human waste goes into outhouses or long drop toilets in each of the little stands that lives there. So that's a basic outline of what happens, and each of the little households has a little garden, or some of them do, and if they're very lucky, some will have boreholes. Now, Kelly, you ought to know what language is spoken. There are two main languages. The first and most commonly spoken language around here is the language of Xitsonga or Shangaan. And it is a beautiful language and not a click language. I think, Kelly, that was the other part of your question. Is it a clicking language? No, it isn't. There are 2 or 3, no, in fact, there are 4 clicking languages in South Africa. One of them is Siswati, the other is Ndebele, and then we have isiZulu, and the most clicky of them all, I suppose, would be isiXhosa. So you can all try and say that. Mrs. Mervine's Advanced Human Geography class, isiXhosa. isiXhosa, and that would be spelled I-S-I-X-H-O-S-A. I-S-I-X-H-O-S-A. And so Shangaan is not a clicky language at all. It is actually quite a whistly language. They say things like Swihari. So one animal would be Shihari, many animals would be Swihari. And if you wanted to say the animals were running, Swihari, Swi, Tsutsuma. And if you wanted to say the animals are running to eat grass, then you would say Swihari, Swi, Tsutsuma, Gujabzani. So it's quite an interesting language. Now we're going to move from here, and I will keep talking about this. Now, Kayla, you are an astute student, clearly, in Mrs. Mervine's Advanced Human Geography class, and you want to know about, sorry, Taylor, not Kayla, for Taylor, as in Swift or the magnificent American guitar. Taylor, you want to know about, are the people out here subsistence farmers? They are largely subsistence farmers. Some have jobs, but there is an unemployment rate of probably between 60 and 70% in some of the villages out here. So in order to survive, people must engage in subsistence farming. And that subsistence farming would take the form of maize growing in the summer when there's rain. And they would grow in communal fields, they will grow maize. And then in the winter time, when the sun's not so hot, they will grow vegetables in the stands at home. So you have a kind of home garden where they grow things like onions, spinach, tomatoes, lettuce, ground nuts sometimes, and sometimes pumpkins. Those are the major little sort of garden crops that they would grow. And then, of course, there is cattle. And a huge tradition of African people, all the way, or sub-Saharan African people, is the keeping of cattle. And cattle, of course, are extremely important in terms of an investment for wealth. And wealth is often measured still to this day in the number of cattle that a person has. There are some guinea fowl, which actually do make relatively good eating if you know how to cook them. If you don't, you may as well eat a stone. Hello, Victor. You're interested in whether the animals are distressed at the noises we make or if they're used to us. Well, Victor, I mean, you kind of watching the screen there should answer that question for you. So you saw these guinea fowls moving to a distance away from us. It wouldn't be so much the noise as our presence. Noise is combined with that, of course, and now they feel that they're within the flight or fight distance, and they are without the flight, outside of the flight distance, so they don't need to run away from where they are now. Same thing with those Nyala. When we first saw them, it was just before you joined us, and there was a female a bit closer than where that male and female were. She moved it to a distance that she felt was safe, and that's how they lived. So yes, we do affect the animals when we drive past. It is not probably as noisy as you think it is where you are. This vehicle will reverberate noise, and there's noise coming in through the microphone at the top of the camera there. I've got a lapel mic which should be picking up my voice, but it will, because of the reverberation, it will sound probably a bit noisier than it actually is. It's quite a quiet car. It's a little straight six engine, so some of you will know what that means. It is quite an old engine though. Fiona, this is quite a wide-ranging question, and if I don't answer it correctly, then please feel sorry. Jonah, not Fiona, Jonah. I'm not hearing Louise quite well today. She said, not Fiona, Jonah, like the dude who got swallowed by the giant fish. Thank you for that, Louise. No need to get shirty. Now, Jonah, you want to know about the geography of this area and the region. It's quite a wide-ranging question, so if I don't give you what you want to hear, please feel free to send through another. And this time I won't call you Fiona, which of course is inescapably not your name. Jonah, the general region is called Mpumalanga, the particular area that we're in. That's the province that we're in. And it consists of the Highveld regions off to the western side there. Highveld means highlands, so it goes up the Drakensberg escarpment onto the highlands. And there's quite a lot of coal mining and that sort of stuff there. The two big towns there would be called Emalahleni. That's Emalahleni. I'm not going to spell it to you unless you ask me to. And Middelburg. They're two very major sort of coal mining centers. And then if you come further east towards the Drakensberg Mountains, which we can't see at the moment, you go down into the low-veld areas, and we're only about, 1,300 feet above sea level here, so much lower down. Some of those areas up at the top there are almost 8,000 feet above sea level. So it's a substantial drop. And as you come down into this area, much smaller towns and settlements. The capital of the province is a place called Nelspruit, and that's a fairly major urban area with pretty much first world services. It's all paved. There are malls. I mean, you would get on very well there. You'd be able to operate in a settlement like that. And if you head north towards where we are now, you start going through rural villages like I was describing, and that's where you would, I suppose, if you came here as a complete foreigner and somebody dropped you there, you'd struggle a little bit because you wouldn't really understand how the systems work. But there's very little in the way of paved roads, no municipal services and that sort of thing. And so that's the sort of settlements down in the low veld here. And then as you come further east, we come into this game reserve area, and that's the Kruger National Park, which extends all the way to the Mozambican border. That is a very rough overview of what this province looks like. To the north of us, and also the Kruger Park, is Limpopo province, and also very similar. The mountains sort of cut them off halfway along, and it's low down, sort of 1,300 feet above sea level over here, between, say, what should we say, between about 3,000 and 8,000 feet from the mountains upwards into the high veld. Does that give you your answer, Jonah? If it doesn't, please feel free to ask again. Hello, Lucas. You were asking about the area of the Kruger National Park. And quite a nice suggestion here. I will do that. I'm going to draw you a map, but first I'm going to just get to some water, because there's some elephant tracks here going towards the water, so it might be quite nice. Lucas, you want to know how big the Kruger National Park is? You've used the term, how many miles is it? Well, miles, of course, is a distance rather than an area. The Kruger National Park takes up 2.2 million hectares. Now, a hectare is the metric system that we use out here for measuring area, and in acres you can multiply that by 2.4 and you'll get to roughly 5 million acres. So the Kruger National Park is roughly 5 million acres, which turns out to be 22,000 square kilometers, and my mental arithmetic will not extend to giving that to you in square miles, but you can work it out. Take 22,000 multiplied by 1.6 and you will get to the number of square miles that the Kruger National Park takes up. It of course extends also across the border. It's called a transfrontier park. It extends into the border, across the border into Mozambique to the east and Zimbabwe to the north. All in all, 8 million acres of contiguous wildlife area. So much larger than anything, I think, in the lower states of the United States. Alaska's got some bigger ones, but bigger than anything here. Alec, you want to know, we've experienced any droughts, any environmental troubles like droughts? Alex, we're in the middle of a drought now, Alex, and although it doesn't look particularly dry in this area, we had 20 millimeters of rain, or about an inch of rain the other day. We're in the middle of the worst drought since 1904. Now, that of course was before even I was born. It was before even Miss Mervine was born, and indeed before anybody currently living was born, we think. And so it's an extremely long time since we had a summer this hot or a summer this dry. And in fact, worldwide, of course, we know that this has been the hottest year in human history since records were kept, and possibly even since before then. and that is taking its toll here. We're having immense drought. That means the animals are starting to suffer. They weren't at the initially, and now as we go sort of towards the dry season without having had the wet season proper, so the animals are starting to suffer a little bit now. Good one, Alex. Thank you very much. Other environmental issues around here? Not many. I mean, there are a number of human-induced ones, but nothing that's that major. There's a waterbuck, Brian. You'll see it running through the bush. Hello, Mrs. Singer. While we are looking at those waterbuck, is that all right? Well, let me go forward. There's some better ones here. Those are waterbuck, everyone. And it's a species of antelope. That's a little baby one. Mrs. Singer, you want to know about issues of poaching. Do we have poaching issues here? Yes, we do. And they can be just divided into two broad categories. The first category would be poaching for the pot. So as we know, there is an enormous unemployment problem. And the unemployment problem means that there are hungry people about. And that means that people will come onto the reserve if they're feeling desperate. They will set snares and try and catch things like those waterbuck or like an impala or something like that and take the meat home to eat it. So whether you can call that poaching or desperation hunting, I don't know. That's up to you. I would call it the latter. But certainly it is an illegal form of hunting. Then you get the other category, which is the big game, commercial poaching. And of course we know that rhino are a major problem. I was just reading an article about elephants at the moment. Up to 50,000 elephants are being shot on this continent every year. Southern Africa at the moment has managed to stay relatively free of this problem, but we reckon the problem is coming here if we're not very careful. I'm just looking over here because there was some alarm calling from some birds, which means they were thinking quite carefully about whether or not there's a predator around here. But I don't see anything. So we know that there's a lot of incursion for rhino poaching. Not in this particular area, because we're on private land, there's a lot more money to throw around in terms of protecting the rhino, and the problem seems to have almost abated on these private reserves. In the Kruger, it's still an issue. Remember, they share a border with Mozambique, which I think is almost 600 kilometers long. That is 600 kilometers is roughly, I don't know, about 400 miles long. And so if there are poachers desperate enough coming in from Mozambique, then it can be a real problem. And they're the real issue. It's not a question, the poaching for the pot is something we can deal with. But obviously we can't afford to lose any more rhino. Hello, Evan. You want to know about agriculture in this area? Evan, I'm no expert on agriculture, and there's certainly no agriculture in this particular area. But what I will tell you, I can't give you figures on how many, farmers there are per hectare and that sort of thing. I can tell you that the area for agriculture in this low-veld area, which means the low-down areas, they grow veggies quite a lot: tomatoes, pumpkins, what do you call them? Zucchinis. Baby marrows, what else would there be? Butternuts. So all kind of gourd or pumpkin type vegetables. And then there are citrus farms, large citrus farms, very large tomato farms, which cause an environmental nightmare. A tomato farm is really not a particularly healthy thing for the earth. And then we do, what else do we have, Brian, out here? We have mainly citrus and tomatoes and a couple of veggies. Then up on the high veld, you will find maize, you might find sunflowers and wheat as well. But otherwise, it's largely wildlife down here. Andrea, what a lovely question. You want to know if I've ever seen an animal out here with a noticeable genetic mutation. I suppose I have, Andrea. I suppose something like a white lion, for example, a lion which carries the gene for leucism, which is a mutation of sorts. It's not a particularly successful one because obviously a white lion is more obvious than a tawny one out here. We see those from time to time. We do see sometimes female antelope like impala or kudu that have scraggly horns, which they shouldn't have horns at all normally. So that would have been a genetic mutation probably that coded for an extra amount of testosterone, which in turn created the horns. I'm just trying to think of anything obvious, any other things. I mean, I suppose you do get the odd thing like a two-headed snake, for example, which would be born, but then it would die almost immediately. So very little. And as it is born in tip-top condition out here, it will die almost immediately. It'll either be eaten by predators or it'll be abandoned by the herd. Great example of an elephant a number of years back, which had a kind of her knees bent the wrong way at the back, and for 3 years the herd tried to keep her up with it, and eventually they abandoned her because she couldn't keep up anymore. And as soon as they abandoned her, she was killed by hyenas. So anything that has a noticeable mutation will normally die, and therefore that mutation, of course, will not survive in the population. Zachary, you want to know about religion in the region. Zachary, I suppose people would be called nominally, of the indigenous people here, they would be called nominally Christian. So if you said to somebody, what, who do you believe in? They would say they believed in God and Jesus, and they have various sects of Christianity out here, the major one being something called the Zionist Christian Church, or ZCC, which is it's a very large church in southern Africa, or some of the beliefs are that they have they have an incredible meeting of millions of people at a place called Moria around Easter time. They don't drink any alcohol. And otherwise it's and they don't eat any pork, but otherwise it's I suppose what you would call a Protestant Christian religion. And then there are others, the Seventh-day Adventists and various other Presbyterians are out here. The Anglicans are out here too. The most famous Anglican, of course, being Archbishop Desmond Tutu, a great son of our country. And then amongst indigenous people, it is always kind of mixed in with a fascinating mix of what I suppose would have been a traditional religion of ancestor worship, or certainly belief in a communing with the ancestors. So people will always take heed of what the ancestors say, and if anything goes wrong in a village or in a family, there's always a suspicion that the family's been bewitched, and often then that they will talk. They need to talk, as it could do through the Quran, that they need to commune or communicate with the ancestors in order to remove the curse that has been placed on the family. That's kudu. That is the largest antelope that we get out here. So those are the major religions. Hello, Mrs. Mervine. You want to know why tomato farming is bad for the land. Mrs. Mervine, tomato farming is bad for the land because what it does is it infects the soil with a particular virus. I think it's a virus. And if you grow tomatoes for more than 2 or 3 years at a time in a particular piece of land, you then cannot grow anything else in that land for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years sometimes. Now, also, so that's one of the reasons. The next reason is that you also have to suck an enormous amount of water. They take a lot of irrigation, tomatoes. And there are giant rivers in the Limpopo and Mpumalanga provinces that are carrying far less water than they would normally because of the tomato farmers. And you combine that with the amount of fertilizer that goes onto the tomato farms and then washes down into those river systems, it can be tremendously environmentally detrimental. And I know there's an enormous tomato farming company up near Limpopo and Mpumalanga, and they keep moving further and further away from their packing depots because the land between them and the packing depots is unusable anymore. So It's not particularly, almost like any monoculture. Any monoculture is going to have a problem. Now, we have had word of a breeding herd of buffalo to get back at close to where we started. We're going to drive back there. Hello, Jonah, not Fiona. You want to know, have I ever been attacked by an animal? I've been warned, and I've been charged by one or two animals, but Jonah, no, I wouldn't. Attacked would imply some kind of physical contact. I've never had physical contact from a wild animal, and that's because I'm generally pretty careful out here. It's not to say it couldn't happen one day by mistake, but we definitely try and stay a certain distance from animals so that doesn't actually occur. I'm going to drive a bit quicker because I'm not sure how much time we have left with you, and I'd like you to see at least a herd of buffalo. It is, of course, very hot at the moment, and so the animals are kind of still sitting around in the shade. We've only got about 10 minutes left with you, so I'm going to drive quite quickly. Robin in Maryland, you say you've seen a video where local people chased animals off a pride of lions chased a pride of lions off a kill, and then went in and stole a piece of the kill. And does this happen often out here? No, Robin, I can tell you categorically it never happens out here. Maybe once or twice, but that I think I've seen the video that you've seen. And Robin, that was shot probably up in Kenya or Tanzania, where the boundaries of the parks are not so nearly clearly defined. I mean, then some of them, those big areas, like there's some warthogs. Well, this is a very sad warthog, this one. We've seen her a few times. She's very ill. See, she's totally emaciated. It's got a little baby, and I think the drought combined with possibly a disease has made her very skinny. And Taylor, you are like Jonah, want to know if I've been attacked by an animal while driving. No, I have had one or two elephants charge, but normally we can get out of the way. I did have one incident where there was a leopard that was being attacked by wild dogs, and the leopard got a fright and jumped up onto the vehicle, and that was a very terrifying experience indeed. But as Louise says, the largest attackers of human beings while driving are flies. Brian, you would agree with that?
I do agree.
Yes, Brian gets attacked by flies a lot.
He's being attacked right now.
He's being savaged at the moment by a large number of flies. Now, this warthog, I believe, is not only suffering from drought. I think there is definitely a sickness or disease within her, because none of the other warthogs look this bad. Some of them are getting a bit skinny, but she is just in a state. Now, one of the things that we don't do, of course, is interfere. So while she doesn't look great, she might survive. A lot of the time animals recover from the most incredibly horrific looking things. Hello, Mia. You want to know how long and hot the average summer day is here? Well, Mia, in the middle of summer, the sun will come up at about, 10 to 5, Brian?
Yeah.
And then in the middle of summer, look at that little thing. He's a bit nervous of us. He's in very fine health. Mia, and then the sun will go down again at about 7 o'clock in the middle of summer. And remember, then in the middle of winter, it doesn't change that much, not like where you are. So we'll have a mid-winter sunrise around 6:45 in the morning, and then the sun will set at sort of just after 5 in the middle of winter. So it's not a huge difference. 2 hours each way, maybe. Now, Delaney, you are You've asked a question that's quite interesting. You say, is it mating season and are there a lot of babies? Remember, mating season and lambing or birthing season are two totally distinct things. Mating season will vary. So for the impala, it will be in May. For the kudu and the water buckets around about now. And the lambing or calving season will normally be during the height of the rains or just after the first rains. So the birthing season for the impala is the end of November and beginning of December. The birthing season for kudu and waterbuck would be probably the end of February. And their mating season, of course, will be, well, we're going into it now. So the mating season is when they mate, and then the calving season, when you'll see lots of babies, is kind of during the height of the first rain. So we are seeing some little kudu and nyala, at least kudu and waterbuck. The nyala have pretty much all given birth. All of the impala have given birth, and you can see the warthogs. That little pig there is probably about a month and a half old. So they would have given birth, well, maybe even 2 months, just around the end of December. Now, Courtney, you want to know about natural disasters in this area. I think let's leave this emaciated pig around, don't you think? Pigs are supposed to be fat. Courtney, you want to know about natural disasters in this area. Courtney, a natural disaster like you get in Virginia Beach, I mean like a hurricane, we don't really get exactly in this area, but off the coast of Mozambique, what we have is something similar called a cyclone. And a cyclone, I think, is formed, if I'm not mistaken, exactly by the same phenomena that would cause a hurricane. Differences in surface and air temperature, and it is the exact same weather system that occurs here in the southern hemisphere and in the Indian Ocean. So that's only about 200 kilometers or 120 miles from here is the coast, and that's where that happens. We're going to keep driving a little bit quicker to see if we can't just quickly get a view of that breeding herd of buffalo. So that's what we'd have here. Then otherwise natural disasters would be drought, and then when those cyclones come in this area, we don't actually get the sort of eye of the storm, if you like you would where you are on the coast. But we do get big storms that come in, and they will cause flooding, localized flooding in the area. Volcanoes, none. This is a very ancient landscape, which means that the tectonic plates on which we sit are very stable. The soil is actually fairly nutrient poor because there hasn't been any volcanic activity here for millennia. So those would be no tornadoes. It's too hilly, I think, for us to have tornadoes. Some parts of South Africa will have tornadoes, and those are the sort of major natural disasters that we get here. Now, another one of my favorite subjects, Lucas. You and I could sit down and yak about this for ages, which we don't have. So I'll give you a very simple answer. You want to know about what the local diet is. What is the local diet of the indigenous people? Well, in prehistory, before the advent of the white man here, and before the importation of maize, of course comes from Mexico, and maize is now the staple diet of people here. White maize, over-refined by fairly unscrupulous and morally bankrupt milling companies, which basically feed people white maize that is almost nutrient-free. And so we have the situation where a large proportion of the population is obese but malnourished at the same time, and that's because of these refined carbohydrates that people eat. So if you're in a poor village like this, you'd probably have a soft maize porridge for breakfast, maybe some white bread with some jam or margarine, none of which is any good for you, and some tea. Then at lunchtime you'd have a kind of stiffer maize porridge, which we call pap, or in Shangaan or Xitsonga we called vuswa. And then you'd have that maybe with a tomato and onion relish, and maybe some local spinach, which you can either grow yourself or you can harvest in the natural areas. And then for those who have a little bit of money, dinner might be also vuswa, that white maize porridge, and a bit of meat if you can get it. Otherwise some fish, maybe from a can, maybe canned pilchards, something like that. And that would be the general diet. Also some chicken. I mean, a lot of people actually keep chickens, and every so often they'll kill a chicken and eat that. But traditionally, that wouldn't have been the diet. Traditionally, people would have eaten probably a lot of game meat. They would have eaten a lot of roots and berries and that sort of thing. Then Jimmy, I think it's Jimmy or Jimny, you want to know about how the weather I'm just going to get your question again, Jimmy. I think it's how the weather affects the animals out here. Jimmy, the weather affects the animals profoundly out here. The hotter it is, the more they will seek shade. The wonderful example, we're going to go and look at some buffalo now, is the fact that in summertime the buffalo will move at night to eat because it's hot in the day. Then they'll lie down in the shade for most of the day, and then in winter time when it's cold at night they'll sleep in a big huddled group, stay warm, and then they'll move around in the day and eat. So that's what happens seasonally. But basically the hotter it is and the drier it is, the more time animals want to spend around water. I don't see any buffalo. Do you, Brian? That is a breeding herd of buffalo. It is the smallest and most invisible breeding herd of buffalo I have ever seen. Apparently they are moving off. Ah, there they are. Okay, I can see them. Let's go around over the top of the damn wall here. Andrea, another brilliant question. Is it easier for animals to get sick from other animals out here? And you were looking at that warthog clearly. And Andrea, I would say it's, same, a little bit like human beings. But remember that there is no medical attention out here, which means that animals are actually more resilient than we are as human beings. And so that little baby warthog obviously hasn't caught the disease that her mother's got, or highly unlikely that she has. But there are some diseases like bovine tuberculosis, which is a kind of lung infection, or I think it's a bacterial lung infection that cattle get, that the buffalo, like we're hopefully going to see, will also get, and that can be transferred through the air. Absolutely. Excuse me, hold on tight everyone. Brian, you're still there?
Really? Hold it on.
Evan, you want to know the life expectancy of some of the animals is. Well, you get something the size of an elephant shrew, which is a little shrew like that, or a bushveld gerbil, which is about the same size, and you'd expect a life expectancy probably of maybe 2, 3, or maybe 4 years. Then you get buffalo like this. And the buffalo will probably live 14 or 15 years. And then you get the elephants, which will live up to 55 or 60 years. Look at all the buffalo. Now, I know they don't look anything like the buffalo in your country, but these are the African or Cape buffalo. And Andrea, you want to know if the indigenous people here know how to speak any international languages? Absolutely they do. Every person in South Africa, when they go to school, must learn English. You have to do English, even if it is as a second language. So while some of the English is poor at best, everybody out here has to learn English. So some of the older people will be unable to speak any English at all, but anybody under the age of, say, I'd say 40, anybody under the age of 40 will have a smattering of English, and the younger the people get, the better their English will be. So yes, everyone has to learn English. And nobody out here, no indigenous person out here would learn probably any other language. And then if you go into Mozambique, which is just the other side of the border, everybody will learn Portuguese. So yeah, depends on basically who the colonists were who came out here, depending on what international language the people learn. Zachary, you want to know what sports the indigenous people play out here? Well, the major sport, the fascination of South African people is football, just like it is in so many other parts of the world. There are no major sort of indigenous games that people play. I suppose like the Irish would have Gaelic football, or you would have gridiron football. There are no sort of indigenous sports like that. The major sport that just about every kid wants to play out here is football, or what you'd call soccer. So these buffalo have just had a drink, and they will often drink, and especially when it's dry like this, they might drink sort of 2 or 3 times a day sometimes. and now they'll go off and have something nice to eat in the form of greenish grass. There's a little bit left after the rain we've had, but even those green shoots are now starting to wilt a little bit. Jonah, does anyone come to South Africa for vacation? Jonah, millions of people come to South Africa for vacation. More than 3 million people a year visit the Kruger National Park. That is excluding all of the private reserves that I'm basically sitting on, like the ones I'm sitting on. And we're sitting on a place called Djuma, which is also a private reserve, part of the Kruger Park. There are hundreds of them around. And basically, Jonah, conservation of many of our national parks, if not all of our national parks, is supplemented and maintained by tourists coming here on vacation. Millions and millions of tourists come to South Africa. They come to the Kruger, they go to Cape Town, and they visit lots of the other magnificent places that this country has to offer. There, the buffalo are having a little bit of a run. They may have caught wind or smelt of us. And of course, without tourism, the local people here wouldn't have jobs at all. So many of that, even despite the fact that I said there's a 60 or 70% unemployment rate here, those that are employed are largely employed in this area by tourists. So people doing all sorts of jobs related to tourism, cooking and cleaning and guiding and tracking and driving and transport and all sorts of other things like that. So we go a little bit forward, Brian. Delaney, what a very clever question. You want to know if there's an overpopulated animal in this area, and what is it if there is one? Delaney, I suppose the only overpopulated animal that I can think of is an impala. The impala are slightly overpopulated because of the provision of artificial water. And that's a whole nother discussion that we can get into. But basically, in this area, artificial water has been provided, so water has been pumped from wells for animals to drink, and that's meant that a reduction in biodiversity, lots of impala, lots of zebra, and far less in the way of, say, sable or roan or sesame or hartebeest, lots of the different antelope that we used to get. I think this area used to support a far larger group or suite of species, and probably number of species as well, when animals were migrating between the perennial rivers and not hanging around kind of permanent water sources like they do now. Nice question, thank you. Now, these buffalo will be trying desperately to avoid lions. Let's just drive down here. And Mrs. Singer, you want to know about have we given additional water to animals? Yes, of course we have, absolutely. In this area, every landowner provides a sort of artificially pumped pan or dam. I mean, we just drove over a big dam wall. And so, yes, there's quite a large amount of artificial water provision. Mrs. Singer? Just drive down into this little dry stream and try and get these animals to walk past. Connor, you want to know what our best animal imitation is? Brian, I think we're both probably quite good at the hardy-dar, wouldn't you say?
I'd say a turkey is mine.
A turkey. Brian, would you like to do your turkey? That's very good. Connor, I would like to demonstrate to you the call of the hardy-dar ibis, an impressive bird with a very long bill. You can look up ibis when we leave you. And it goes like this. The buffalo have run away. Okay, chaps, that's it from us and Mrs. Mervine's class. The rest of you can carry on watching on the internet and stay with us for the next 2.25 hours. But thank you very much for joining us, Mrs. Mervine's class. I hope that was semi-informative for you and what you were looking for. And we will see you hopefully at another stage. Have a good day at school and look after yourselves. And that is the thumb saying, learn hard.
Learn hard.
Buffalo everywhere. James Taylor, an interesting question. Do we have a problem with witchcraft? Personally, James, I have no problem with witchcraft at all. Brian?
No, I don't mind.
You don't have any problem with witchcraft? No. And that is, of course, a slightly facetious answer. But James, there is witchcraft. People, absolutely. A lot of the local people have very strong beliefs in what the local verb for it is to lawyer. So if I say ndakuloya, it means I'm going to put a spell on you. And there are lots of people that believe that spells have been cast on them. Very seldom can they ever figure out who put the spell. The reason I'm not sure I'd describe it as a problem, but there is definitely a very strong belief in elements of witchcraft, and there are traditional healers or traditional medicine men, if you like, what I suppose would colonially be called the witch doctor, which a word we try and stay away from now, who would mix up a potion and say, well, this will do that and this will do that. So, James, yes, it does absolutely. There's still a lot of that sort of thing around here. That's normally, in fact, it's almost always in these rural communities. That said, there was a government minister the other day who said that she couldn't go to meetings because she had been bewitched. Didn't stop her racking up massive bills on her credit card, however. Country West, a very nice question about mining. Do they surface mine or deep mine for coal here? I think they do a bit of both, Country West. I mean, I'm not a mining expert by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of the stuff that I was talking about in Mpumalanga is basically surface mining. And it is doing untold damage to some very precious old areas of South Africa. Nigel, I'll put the camera on. Nigel, you want to know if I am a famous celebrity in South Africa and if I get mobbed and asked for my autograph everywhere I go.
Don't be modest, James.
Right. Nigel, I'm an immense celebrity. I'm basically the Brad Pitt of South Africa, the Jason Statham of Johannesburg. Nigel, no one knows who I am in South Africa at all. There's absolutely no one who knows who I am in South Africa. I'm not a big celebrity by any stretch of the imagination, but thank you for asking. It makes me feel very good indeed. Questions today, quite something. Andre, you say you filmed a wedding in your hometown of Howick a little while back, and the master of ceremonies was a kilted fellow who looked a bit like me. I would say it's probably quite likely, yes, that it was me. I would suspect that the wedding was the Miller wedding of December the 16th, 2012 or 13. Maybe? There we go. That is an astonishing coincidence. Now, Mr. Moustache, you want to know if there's anything from my home that I miss while I'm out here, and I was going to refuse to answer your question because initially I didn't know where you were getting hold of us from this time round. You're back in Iceland now, right? Mr. Moustache, this is kind of my home now, you know. I've got everything that I kind of want out here. I've got my guitars, I've got a computer that I can send messages to people on and write my thoughts down on. I have people to talk to. I suppose the only thing that I miss from home really would be my family every so often. My folks live down in the Eastern Cape, and my brother lives in Johannesburg, and my sister lives in London. But I guess this is pretty much my home now. I mean, if you were to say, what is your home, I'd say probably in the Eastern Cape. And so from home there, I would miss the sea, I guess. But in terms of things of the city, no, not anymore. I certainly used to, but I don't anymore. There's a young buffalo. I don't feel like we've talked about the buffalo at all. They've kind of been an incidental part of this afternoon. Donna, you're taking me down a road that could get me in trouble, but you're absolutely right. You say we won't interfere with animals out here, but surely providing water is oh, there's a tiny little one there. Well spotted, Louisi. I'm just going to move forward as I answer this, but Donna, yes, absolutely. Providing water is completely interfering. There's no question about it. So, you know, where do you draw the line? I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line, and it's really not up to me to decide, thankfully. There's a tiny little one in there. Was there another one here, Brian? I didn't even see where you were pointing. There we go, little one. Tiny little calf going through there. That can't be more than a week old. Still a little bit unsure on its feet. That's very sweet. So, Donna, yeah, providing water is... There's no question that it changes the biodiversity, it changes the suite of species that are in an area. Is it a bad thing? No, that's a much more grey area. Is it different from interfering when there's an injured animal? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd certainly have an argument if you said that it wasn't any different. You might be able to argue the other way as well. But I would say it is a grey area, Donna. Nice question. Good one to have a debate and a talk about. I'm not going to drive off road after these guys. These chaps do get a little bit nervous. They're not the most sort of calm buffalo. Ooh. Mary, you're in Canandaigua, New York. That sounds like an interesting place to be, and you want to know if there's anybody in the local villages here that does not have clean running water. Yes, everybody, Mary. Everybody. Nobody has running water. Unless you're rich enough to have a well or borehole in your stand, I'm afraid everybody out here lacks running water in the indigenous, or not in the local villages out here. So, Mary, there are taps, communal taps. I'm going to smack you on the bottom. Buffalo is very tempting. Don't worry, I'm just joking. I won't really smack you on the bottom. But thank you for letting us get this close to you. Good day. This is wonderful. I've never been this close to a buffalo here. She's so cool. Hello, Ben. You're just 13 years old. There's a buffalo. Can you see it, Brian? What's that thing there?
Oh,
that one there. Ben, you're 14 and you want to know... Sorry, I've lost your question. I was so astonished by this buffalo. It'll come again. Hello. Oh, Ben, you want to know if buffalo ever gore each other when they're in tight herds like this? Ben, it's possible that they could. The bulls, when they fight, might gore each other. It's unusual, though. The fights normally are just head bashing. Look at the ticks. Look at all those ticks. Those are all ticks sucking on the blood of this poor buffalo. And amazingly, she will be able to survive that. I mean, if you had that many ticks on your leg, you'd have tick bite fever for the rest of your days. You need some oxpeckers down here, quickly. There's my head, sorry about that. Look at all those ticks. Brian, I can't even hear an oxpecker, can you?
No.
This is very interesting. Pamela, you want to know about nursing water buffalo. Pamela, just remember, before I answer your question, these are not water buffalo. These are Cape or African buffalo. Water buffalo is a very similar looking but distantly related cousin of the African or Cape buffalo that occurs in Asia and an introduced version into Australia. Now, how long does the African buffalo nurse? I think it's up to a year, if I'm not mistaken. Probably a bit, no, it must be less than that, but it's probably, I actually don't know. I can't believe this, I've forgotten it. I'm going to say 6 months, but we're going to have to check for you. Sorry, Pamela, let's check when the weaning is. I think it's about 6 months. Now that one, I mean, this chap's only about a year old, and he's eating grass voraciously. In Tampa, you've been using, I had no idea that this thing existed. You've been using Twitter extensively, obviously, and there's something on Twitter called the Fact in Your Face for the day, or is that what it's called, Fact in Your Face? And you say, is it true? Fact in Your Face page. Well, I think it's quite something. It sounds quite forceful, really. The Fact in Your Face page said to you that dung beetles are able to navigate by the stars, by the Milky Way. Is that true? Yes, it is true for some of them, I believe. Remember, there are only 900. There are over 900 species of dung beetle. Some of them navigate with a mite. It's like a parasitoid that lives on top of the dung beetle, and somehow, if you take all the mites off, they can't find dung anymore. But I've definitely read an article, and it was in the distant recesses of my mind, where it explained how it is that dung beetles are able to fly using the Milky Way. And I think it's why they don't fly on cloudy nights. And I think if you... Absolutely, they do experiments where they've put them in kind of controlled situations, and then they move like a planetarium, where they will move the stars around, and the dung beetles will fly according to different directions from following the light of the stars. Yeah, brilliant. Isn't that amazing? Thank you, Kat. So I may subscribe myself to the Fact in Your Face. Buffalo do apparently wean at 6 months. Let me just turn around here. This is the most confiding buffalo cow in the Sabi Sands. She's fantastic. Now, Jamie, you want to know what we eat in camp, basically, and can we get the same foods that we get in town, or can we get the same food in camp that we get in town? Jamie, pretty much exactly the same. Our food comes from a large supermarket retail store in Hoedspruit. The selection is definitely smaller. I mean, we can get pretty much everything that we would eat at home. Brian, is there anything particular that you would miss? What do you like to eat?
Sushi.
Sushi? We can't get sushi in Hoedspruit.
Well, I think we can, actually.
You probably, in fact, I think you can. Whether you should eat it or not is an entirely different matter. Fish. in the low veld is not a sort of delicacy you want to be eating. The one thing we do struggle with, though, interestingly, is kind of really good fresh produce, because very little of it is produced here locally. And I mean, the amazing thing, there's a chain called WildEarthTV, which is in the UK it would be the equivalent of your M&S, and there's one in Palabor, which is not too far north from here. But some of the lettuce, for example, that they will sell you is picked locally, sent to a market in Johannesburg 600 kilometers away, packed there, and then sent back again. So, I mean, astonishingly, it's actually quite difficult to get hold of local produce out here. We do get our green produce from a sort of local communal farming project, which is very nice. But interestingly, you can't get, that's often some of the most difficult things to get, fresh fruit and that sort of thing, because everything grown in the area is sent to the big packing houses in Johannesburg or Pretoria and then sent around the country. I don't miss anything particular from home, I don't think. As long as I've got decent coffee to drink, I'm fine. Steve, you asked a question I really don't think that I'm qualified to answer, given that I'm not a divine being. You want to know if the buffalo ears are attached upside down in order to make them look more grumpy. Brian?
Potentially, maybe.
Potentially, maybe. I like that answer. Potentially, maybe, Stevig. It certainly does help them to look a little bit more severe, doesn't it? Let's move a little bit further up here, and then I think we'll probably leave these beefs to themselves. So just to reiterate, for those of you who've tuned in and wondering why you are saddled with my voice droning at you for such an abominable length of time, Scott is unfortunately not allowed or not able to go out because Wendy has returned and we're still rewiring her, and Jigger has gone to hospital, which is where Jigger belongs permanently. So Scott will be back with us tomorrow morning. Now, I was just thinking about this, James Richard. You say Scott was with his buffalo herd this morning, and he was also worried about the lack of oxpeckers. I've just seen two flying off over there. I can hear them going now. Psh, 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 psh. So they're around, but I agree, there are not a lot of them. I don't know why that would be. It's very worrying. I mean, they're a very crucial part of the ecosystem out here. Try and get a little bit closer to the front of the herd. Sharon, you're in Belito, which I believe is a very nice seaside town near Durban. I haven't actually been there myself. Sharon, you want to know if there is a weak buffalo herd born, if there is a weak buffalo calf born, will the herd look after it as an elephant herd might, or will they just leave it? Sharon, to a certain extent they'll look after it. But if it cannot keep up with the herd, they certainly are not going to sacrifice themselves for it, and it will be left to basically be eaten, I'm afraid. So a very weak buffalo herd with some buffalo calf with some kind of sickness, the herd will unfortunately leave. Nice question. Thank you, Sharon. Ravi, a nice question from you, and I think it's an interesting point. You say, is a drought not nature's way of giving the predators an advantage, while at the same time allowing the land time to rest? Ravi, the first part of your question would be yes. I suppose you could say that if you believe that nature had some kind of overall desire for health, then yes, I would agree that a drought was a good thing for the carnivores, and certainly it will change the balance of predators to prey. But remember now, Ravi, in a drought like this, although there will be animal die-off, the only reason that there is animal die-off is because the land has been eaten flat. So it doesn't actually provide that much of a rest for the land until it gets seriously. Although there will be animal die-off, the only reason that there is animal die-off is because the land has been eaten flat. So it doesn't actually provide that much of a rest for the land until it gets seriously. Although there will be animal die-off, the only reason that there is animal die-off is because the land has been eaten flat. So it doesn't actually provide that much of a rest for the land until it gets seriously. You want to know about the bush news? I'm just going to assume you haven't been watching for a little while. You want to know about any leopard movements and lion movements and rain that we might have had, and that's a really nice opportunity to give a bit of an update. You also say you're sad about Scott and Nikki. I think we're all very sad about Scott and Nikki, but you know, it's time for them to go exploring, perhaps. Anyway, we'll get on to that later. We'll be celebrating them over the course of the weekend. Ashley, in terms of leopard movements, we had some female tracks coming in from the south today and then heading out again. Karula has been concentrating in that area. Does she still have cubs? Possibly. And would be very, very nice, very exciting, beyond exciting if that were to be the case. Shadow, we haven't heard of for a while. She's been around Arathusa, I know, but also in a fairly concentrated area, so that's a possibility. Lions, we've had over the last few days some very nice lion sightings. We had the Nkuhuma Pride around the place, and then we had one female on her own, one of the Nkuhumas, the one with the, she's most easily, she got quite slanty eyes. She's most easily identified by her slanty eyes, and she was with one of the Birmingham boys, one with a scarred face. He looks like he's been mauled by I don't know, he looks like he's been mauled by a steel brush over the top of his face. He's a small lion. I know that when you see them initially you think they're quite big, but they're not big, those Birmingham boys. They're not large fellows. And this guy is he's an okay size, but it's there. You can see that they're fighting. I don't know if they're fighting with each other, but they've certainly got scars all over them. Anyway, he was seen on the cheetah cut line with that lioness a few days ago, and then he was found again yesterday on Djuma. I don't know where the other three are. I think they were, no, I do know. They were on Torchwood, and then they were on Nkoro after that. So I'm not sure why he split up from them. We don't know where the Nkuhuma Pride is at the moment. They were on Simbambili yesterday. I think they were on Simbambili yesterday. Wild dogs were there too this morning. And then what else happened? Oh, the hyenas moved house. They moved home. They moved to Aubrey's Road. They no longer wish to be on Mbubu Road. And so they've moved off to Aubrey's. I'm just turning the game drive radio up in case a great plethora of animals is being seen, and I don't know about it. And we had a little bit of rain, actually. Almost exactly a week ago, we had 20 millimeters of rain, which is almost an inch, and it's created a flush of green, but not on all the reserves. So, I mean, in this particular area, it looks quite nice and green now. We've got some green grass on the fire break here. But if you go further east, along, say, around Ledwood Road, which is in the southeastern corner, it's actually quite dry still. Let us carefully ease our way down here.
Go ahead, you.
Hello, Debbie in Vancouver. Debbie, you say, would I include the drought as a natural disaster, given that I didn't include it as a natural disaster when I talked to the kids? Debbie, we've just been talking about the drought already, and so I kind of assumed that they would assume it was a natural disaster, but absolutely I would. I would definitely consider it a natural disaster. What? Disaster? Upheaval, yes. Disaster? I'm not so sure. For the farmers in the country at the moment, a huge disaster. Out here, yeah, I'm just not so convinced that it's that much of a disaster yet. Right, let us drive at a relatively decent lick to get to Bivelshoek Dam, so that we might find something there. But before, we must just be careful, Brian. Remember those warthogs that like to come out of their burrow. It's just up here. I don't think they'll be home yet. There's a termite mound just up here in which 2 sows and 5 little babies live. Which is an amazing thing to see. There it is. It's that mound there. You see that mound there, Brian? Tony, while we look for these warthog, you want to know if there are coffee plantations in South Africa. I don't think there are. I know there's a company called the Sabi River Valley Coffee Company, but I think they're a roasting company. I don't think they actually grow coffee here. I don't think it's wet enough. Yes, they're definitely not home yet. That is their home, though. In the last few nights I've come past here, the sow sticks her head out. She doesn't like it when you stop near here, and then she comes bucketing out, and her friend comes bucketing next, probably her sister, and then they are followed by 5 little piglets. So maybe we'll catch them going in there a little bit later. I'm sure they're out grazing at the moment. Also quite a nice European roller up there, Brian. Beautifully lit so that you'll just get a black blob on the branch. Easily identifiable, isn't it? Yeah, definitely a roller, everybody. Definitely European. Oh, there we go. We've got a bit of blue there. Maroon brown on the back. Definitely a European roller. And even if we just had the silhouette, everyone, we would know, because it's just got that roller shape. And of course, we use the term GIS, general impression, size and shape, and that's what, it's just got the GIS of a roller. It just looks like that. It's got a little tooth on the end of its beak for catching insects, and it's just got that shape. Sitting perched out exposed, looking for insects on the ground, which it'll leap down and grab at the earliest available opportunity. On we go, Brian. Let us forge ahead fearlessly into the sun, into the blinding sun. Julie, this is quite exciting. You were in York in the United Kingdom, North Country, of course, and you want to know if there are any hippo that have, we've lost any hippo here, because your brother, who's in Kruger now, has seen a number of dead hippo. Julie, we haven't lost any hippo here, but remember, Kruger itself, proper, where your brother is probably, it's definitely further east of here. And exponentially the rain has reduced as you go from the mountains to the east, and Kruger's having a much worse time of it than even we are here. So it definitely, the Kruger hippos are really struggling. Now this, everybody, is where the leopard's kill was. It was in this thicket. We could see the kill. Oh, the kill's still there. You see it there, Brian? You just go back a bit. I think this leopard's abandoned this kill. You see where I'm looking, Brian?
I know it is, I can't.
You can't actually, I'll get a picture of it. It's in the middle of this tree, everyone. And I just go past very slowly every time to see if I can maybe see the spots of a leopard watching. I know that what I'm looking at now is a log. I'm going to look anyway. It is a log. I think he's abandoned that kill. Ravi, you say that you reckon that our buffalo here are relatively closely related to domestic cattle. Yes, they are. And you say, well, obviously beef are grain-fed, and some of them eat a little bit of grass. And how do I think that that affects their metabolism? Ravi, I think it affects their metabolism very poorly, to be honest. I think that's why we have steak with such a huge layer of yellow fat on it. That is caused by the grains that animals eat. They are not evolved to eat grain. No cattle, no human being, no animal is evolved to eat grain in the quantities that we eat it. And so there is a huge issue with it, I think. And I think it's, well, first of all, it's not particularly environmentally friendly to be feeding it to them. Secondly, what it does is that often you get them eating this kind of, what's it called, Roundup Ready maize, and Roundup Ready, for those of you who don't know, is a genetically modified maize that you can spray. Basically, you can spray it with any pesticide in the world, and it'll kill every known plant except this particular maize species. Now, what happens is that the cattle eats this stuff, and it deposits something called glyphosate in the fat. And that glyphosate is a carcinogenic substance. So when you are feeding your cattle Roundup Ready maize, which is, most of the maize that, I think it's most of the maize we get at the moment, you're actually, you're creating some serious problems. Cattle, like I say, not evolved to eat that stuff. Cattle are evolved to eat grass, and if you eat a grass-fed piece of beef, it will have a much smaller amount of fat, and that fat is obviously very good for you, but it doesn't have any of the chemicals. There's some elephants, Brian. I'm just going to drive a bit quicker. Luckily coming on to Djuma. So, Ravi, yeah, I think, for me, if I can, I will only eat grass-fed beef, and only a very little of it. Making a nasty noise on the tyre there. Anyway, we'll hope the wheel doesn't fall off. So yeah, Ravi, I think, does that answer your question? I think there's a real issue, especially with feedlot, mass-produced beef, mass-produced any lamb, pork, you name it. If it's grain-fed, you can be pretty sure that it's probably not very good for you. Remember that a cow or a giraffe or a buffalo is evolved to regurgitate grass, chew it, and then re-swallow it. And here's some eddies. Beautiful. And of course, you don't need to this is my favorite little herd. It's the herd with the cut-off trunk mum. We'll call her half-trunk mum. There she is with her little foal. And while we look at them, Ig, thank you very much. You say that there are coffee plantations, and the Sabi River Valley Coffee Company does grow their own stuff, and there is one also in Natal. Thank you, Ig. In Pretoria, Ignatius. Little one. Now probably, 5 weeks old? Tiny little baby. And I'm still not sure if the other two in this herd are either her siblings or perhaps her offspring. I think one of them is her offspring. I think that the other little one is her offspring. And I think the bigger one is perhaps a sibling. Let's go back a bit. Brian and I have extensive experience of this herd. During the trials, or not the trials, the rehearsals that we did for the Big Cat Week, one of the trials we did, we sat with this herd, what, 4 hours, 3 hours? And the elephants eventually got so bored of us that they went to sleep, all 4 of them. There was only 3 at that stage. Just try and ease our way in here. They're a lovely herd, and I'm just so impressed that this cow with her half trunk has managed to forge herself a little herd, successfully breed, maybe have 3 youngsters. Possibly just the 2 though. Hold on, everyone. There we go. Oh, look at suckling. One is suckling there. Trying to. Mum's not standing very still. Nearly tripped over the log. So sweet. If they go into that thick stuff, everyone, I'm going to leave them to go. I don't want to kind of disturb them too much. There's a little one here. They'll be eating grass as much as they can at the moment, instead of the hard bushes and leaves. Let's go a little bit closer. Oh. Zoe, thank you very much for your kind compliment. You say I'm an excellent public speaker. Zoe, that is very kind of you, and you say, was I ever nervous as a youngster public speaking? Yes, I was, but only when I was unprepared. So I think preparation for me as a public speaker is the most important thing to not being nervous. Don't hide behind the bush, elephant. That elephant has almost disappeared. It's almost completely invisible there. It's a very unfortunate state of affairs. I'm going to go a little bit forward, but I'll see if we can sneak in the middle there. Hello, Gracie, aged 8. You're not feeling so well today, I don't think. And you say you love elephants and they make you feel a bit better. Well, I'm very glad they make you feel a bit better, Gracie. We'll spend a good deal of time with these elephants. Then if we can, if we can't, we'll try and find some others. Now, Gracie, I have a very special message from you from Scott today. And he was going to have a tea party with you today, but because Wendy is not working properly, he's going to have his tea party with you tomorrow. So please don't fear. He's just giving you what we call a rain check. He's going to have tea with you tomorrow. I don't know that I can get any closer to these chaps, I'm afraid. They've gone to some rather thick stuff to eat. The combretum trees and the silver cluster leaf trees, the ziziphus trees, and in the case of that little one, have a drink of milk. Now, we were talking this morning about tusks, and somebody asked the question about what is the purpose of tusks, what are they for, and I spoke about the groove that sometimes forms on an elephant's tusk from where she uses it to break off branches. Now, an elephant like this one that we're looking at here has got a very defined groove, and that's because she uses her tusk. There, you can just see it there. She uses her tusk more than most elephants would because her trunk is obviously not prehensile. It doesn't have that sort of two-fingered hand on the bottom of it, which means she uses her tusks more than other elephants do, and so that groove is a lot more marked. And I mean, there's no question that tusk will eventually fall off over there, and she's going to have to make a new groove, perhaps on the other tusk. And as you can very easily see from that, elephants are either left or right tusked, depending. I'm not sure if it's they actually are left or right tusked, or if it's actually just a habit that forms. But I hope, rather like with us, and in fact they twist their trunks in normally only a right direction or a left direction. And I hope for her sake that she learns to use her other hand a bit more easily than human beings learn to use their wrong hands. Ambitrunkstrous. You like that word, Brian?
I did.
James Richard, you say very interestingly in the parts of the US there are some moose that are being taken out by a great explosion of ticks at the moment, and if there was an animal out here, would it happen, or I mean, if there was an outbreak here, would it happen here? James, I can't imagine that it would, you know. I would imagine that either that tick has been introduced to the area and is therefore unfamiliar, or the moose's immune system is unable to deal with the parasites introduced by those ticks, or perhaps there is some kind of, I don't know, nutritional deficiency or other biological reason for why that should happen. Maybe they're, I don't know, some kind of an uber batch of ticks that are just not susceptible to the defenses that the moose have. That is fascinating. I'm really interested by that. I can't imagine a situation like that occurring here with the natural ticks and in the course of a natural sort of cycle of things. Of course, a drought will bring out things like anthrax. It certainly will make those spores more likely to affect animals. But I mean, that again is a fairly natural thing. Oh, that little elephant. It's too sweet. Now I love the color there of the green and the gray. Ravi, a question, I'm not sure which part of your question or which way you're leaning. You're saying you think the drought will probably affect bushfires in some way. It does affect the bushfires, but I think probably in a sort of counterintuitive way to the way many people think it would. There is no grass during a drought, of course. You can see the grass is very low. It's about 1/8 of the length it would be normally at this time of year. And so, Ravi, what that means is that, there we go, thank you, Brian. What that means is that there will be no fire at all. Remember, a fire that comes through here uses grass as the fuel load, not these trees. These trees are extremely fire resistant, and unless they have a massive load of grass underneath them, they will not catch fire. So the trees, at the moment, I wouldn't even bother to burn a fire break during this next dry season, because I really don't think that fire is going to be a problem for us until we get the next big rains and the next big growth season. So it's completely unlike a big bushfire that would go through the eucalyptus of Australia, or the gum trees, or those enormous fires you have in California which go through the pines, I think. I mean, where the trees actually kind of explode into life when the fire goes through the area. Those are wattled starlings flying about there. That's quite nice to see. I've seen pictures of those fires going, sort of exploding from treetop to treetop. And that just doesn't happen here. These fires are these leaves and trees are tremendously fire resistant. I'm afraid we can't really go any. Let me try and just sneak a little bit closer. This is too big to miss. There's a big log in front of us there, everybody, and if I make too much noise, they'll run.